Okay, hi, this is Backshots. She's Inane, and I'm Vacuous. And yeah, you can tell us what we're going to be talking about. No, wait, we have to thank our sound engineer, my beautiful wife. Thank you, Vic.
She's not my beautiful wife. Sorry, I had to say that. Hi. Wait, which names did we go with?
Inane.
Oh, I'm inane.
You're Inane.
I'm inane. Okay. He's calling me inane. So. Jesus Christ, I wrote so much shit for this. Um. So today I want to explain to my good friend Vacuous um this text which I've really liked for a very long time. I think I first read it probably in 2015, 2016. So when I was at university and I was in my big kind of like edgy anti-civ nihilist phase. I'm still kind of there, but like not as much as I used to be. I'm not in the like full on like everyone should kill themselves right now kind of mode anymore. Um and then the name of the text is Worker Student Action Committees. It is about Paris in May 1968. It's by Fredy Perlman. Just
Felt like you were doing some kind of blessing.
I was turning my head to cough. It's by Fredy Perlman and Roger Gregoire. I can't pronounce French words or names. And they ended up publishing it in 1969. In my notes, I've written 1969 brackets nice. And then it ended up getting like properly printed in 1970. Because Fredy Perlman, one of the guys who wrote it, is also one of the founders of Black and Red Press, which is based in Detroit and is sick as hell, always has been. Published like all of his stuff through that. I think the original founders were him and his wife and some other people. His wife is apparently also very cool.
Wait, is he still alive?
No.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. It's because this is so intimate because we're sharing a microphone and we've like never crossed these kind of physical boundaries before. Um, so yeah, I'm trying to ask you a question, but then I'm just completely forgetting that I need to like move right in. Yes, is he still alive?
No, he is dead. I actually don't have written down when he died. I was meant to have that. Hang on a second, let me just open his obituary. I've got that in the notes. On July 26th, 1985, Freddie underwent heart surgery at Henry Ford Hospital to replace two valves. His damaged heart was not able to resume its functioning at the end of the operation. So he died in 1985.
Wait, 1985? 1965? 1985, okay.
Yeah, he died in 1985. If he died in 1965, he wouldn't have been able to write about
I'm
1968.
sorry, there's a lot of there's a lot of 60s in this document.
Yeah, I would say like a solid 5% of this entire document is the numbers 6 and 8. Yeah. Do you want me to just tell you about Freddie Perlman now? I'm not going to talk about Roger Gregoire because A, it's really hard to find info on him. I tried. I assume there's probably info on him in French. And also B, apparently he kind of ended up being a bit of a dick. Him and Perlman fell out later.
Okay, yes, tell me about Freddie.
I love Freddie Perlman. He is my favorite, like critical theorist, thinker, guy of like the 20th century. He wrote this book called Against History, Against Leviathan, which is my favorite book of all time. It's this like epic poem using the like Hobbesian metaphor of Leviathan to be the state, to like chart the course of human civilization from a critical lens. He is anti-civilization and kind of like view it as this like grand tragedy, as like this Leviathan consumes the world and like all of the activities of like free humanity to try and escape it and free themselves from it, and like kind of repainting history in that way. In the title, it's written like his hyphen story. So he is Czech. He was born in Czechoslovakia in 1934 in Brno. I've got it written down in the script. It says the same place as Adam Ondra. I assume you have no idea who that is.
No, that yeah, I can see that you've said lol, but I can't join in with that joke.
So Adam Ondra is a very famous climber. He is probably the best climber currently alive and like actively competing. He's amazing. I'm not going to go into who Adam Ondra is. That's going to be, yeah. I've been watching loads of his videos recently. And his family basically fled Czechoslovakia just before Nazi occupation.
We're talking about the climber's family.
No. I'm talking about Fredy Perlman again. Sorry. Yes, Fredy Perlman's family fled just before the Nazi occupation. Adam Ondra is not old enough to have been alive at this point. He fled. His family and him as a child fled from Czechoslovakia to Bolivia to escape the Nazis, and then kind of ended up through various other things, ended up in like various different parts of the US. So like I'm looking at his obituary right now. It's Mobile, Alabama, Brooklyn, Kentucky, Cincinnati, and Ohio. And then he ends up like going to college in Kentucky and UCLA, and like gets radicalized like while he's at UCLA. And then he ends up doing a master's and a PhD at the University of Belgrade in Yugoslavia, which at this point is a socialist state but is not aligned with Moscow.
Okay.
It's Titoist.
Okay.
So it's like a very interestingly different state, and like is run slightly differently, and kind of has this is supposed to like actually be doing like workers' control of things. Like workers are supposed to be like actually in control of the factories they work in and stuff like that.
I'm going to say again, I don't know what Titoist means, but I feel that might be another little yeah, I'm going to skip over that one because I want to hear more about his life and get to some juicy stuff.
Yeah, no, that's really not important at this point. So he then goes back to the US, and then he is just a lecturer, I think, at the University of Michigan at this point. He's living in Detroit. And then he is in Turin in May 1968.
My dad went on a walking tour in Turin, so that's my immediate association.
Okay. Was it nice? Did he enjoy Turin?
Yes. I remember being a kid and having to go log on to dial up and look at him on a webcam waving to me from Turin, and I didn't know it was in Italy until literally just now.
Oh. Okay, yeah. Turin is also like the center of the Italian workers' movement in a lot of ways, because it's a really heavily industrialized city in the north, and was like also the capital of the state that ended up. Oh, I'm going to go on a tangent here about Italian unification and the Italian labor movement. I'll be really quick, I promise. It's where the Fiat factory is, and they were like really. They were like the workers in Turin tended to be much more radical than in the rest of Italy. And there's like a whole thing. I'm not going to go on my entire I have a whole thing which I could go on about Gramsci and Bordiger and stuff here. I'm not going to do that. That can be a different episode if we want to do it. Anyway, he's in Turin. He's lecturing. He hears about what's happening in Paris. I'm so sorry for these tangents.
He's in Turin. He's lecturing.
He hears about what's going on in Paris. There's these big riots. Oh my God, we're doing communism in the Western Hemisphere. The French Republic is being overthrown again. They keep doing this. He gets on the last train before the rail strikes shut down the rail lines to Paris.
Whoa. You didn't even need to write that down.
Yeah, I didn't even need to look at my notes for doing that. I've read through these notes so many times that I'm like,
But I mean, it's literally that part's not even written down. Oh, okay, it is. I can't read.
Yeah. So then he gets there, and the place which he ends up working, like doing stuff during the uprising, is the Sensier Center, which is this. I actually don't really know what the Sensier Center is normally. I just know that it's the place where he does this. It's part of the University of Paris at this point. And that's like where all of this work happens. Yeah, you can look that up. That would be useful.
No, I'm making a little map.
Oh, cute. Oh, yeah, I saw you were making this map earlier. And then he goes back. He goes back to Michigan after this. He helps start Black and Red Publishers. He writes against History Against Leviathan between like 82 and 83, which is much later. He writes a lot of other stuff in between then. He writes, yeah, there you go. He's showing it to me on the map right now. Cool. And writes a lot about like atomic power and stuff like that, and gets really interested in like American indigenous history and stuff like that. And that really heavily influenced him later. I adore him. He has this quote which people always use about him, which he says, "The only ist name I respond to is cellist," because he was actually like a very talented concert cellist.
That's so cute.
Yeah, I'm just going to find like the little thing. Yes, in 1983, Fredy joined the cello section of the Dearborn Orchestra, and in June 1985 performed quartets by Mozart and Schumann at the program for the Physicians for Social Responsibility. He also wrote quite a lot about like anti-Semitism and nationalism as well. He was not, I believe, Jewish himself, but yeah.
I love that you actually read my mind, and then I was like, maybe that's not relevant. Can I see a picture of him? It's 4:20.
I have a 4:20 alarm which just went off.
Every single day since she was like 15.
Okay, so there's like this picture of him, which is very cute and sweet. This is the picture of him that I absolutely love. Look at him.
Oh. Okay, what is he doing? Okay, what's he doing in this picture? He's
You describe it.
okay. To me, it looks like he is pulling some prints of photographs or posters out of a. Oh my god, I'm so embarrassed that I don't know what kind of press that is. A lithograph or a shit. Okay. Do you know what kind of press that is?
I do not know what kind of press that is, but this is actually one of the reasons why I wanted to do this episode with you, is because I know that you like know about printing and care about it.
Yeah.
And he's like very much like a kind of like, I think if he was alive today, he would be a distroist. He would be like working in like a punk he would be like doing a punk distro, like printing zines about like good security culture and riots and like land back decolonization and stuff.
Do you think he would like that IKEA hack, like riot zine that I showed you?
Oh my god, yes. Okay, we can put that in the episode notes actually.
Yeah, it's like one of the best things I've ever seen from like the student riots last summer, right? Like summer 2023 or spring summer. It was the spring summer.
Yeah, I think it was March, May.
Yeah.
What is it with the French and rioting in March and May?
It's just the season for it. It's a good temperature.
So genuinely, this is like a random piece of thing which is stuck in my head from someone which I went on one date with years ago. Is they said to me that like part of what they were a sociology student at Goldsmiths. I've been on so many dates with people from Goldsmiths, it's obscene. Despite not being a Goldsmith student myself at any point. I'm married to a Goldsmith student.
It's almost like you have a type.
Yeah, I do have a type. Also, I live in London. I'm gay and transgender.
Terrible infosec.
How many gay transgender people are there in London, do you think, who are also anarchists?
Who are married to Goldsmith students.
Okay, no, genuinely, I think that's actually like quite a lot of the people who describe who are, like.
No, I know. Yeah.
I don't think married to Goldsmith students narrows down the former very much.
I don't think it does. That's
There is a noticeable trend of insurrections and uprisings being more likely to happen when the temperature is over 18 degrees centigrade, and I think the like perfect temperature is something around 23 to 26.
Fuck, I've actually heard this. Yeah, I've actually heard this before. And yeah, I also just freaked that your laptop had died. Everything's good. I've actually heard this before. I also want to say that distroist is a term that I've only learned from you in the last couple of months, and it's like, yeah, it's like one of my favorites. I know so many people like that. Yes.
For people who don't know, the word distroist just refers to like it's a joke, but it's also not a joke. It's it's just like anarchist punks whose like main form of like stuff they do is printing and distributing zines and like stickers and shit and like flags and stuff. Kind of just comes out of the like distro scene in the US mostly. The folks I know who introduced me to like I first saw using the word were Phila Distro in Pittsburgh, who seem like really cool folks. I don't know.
All right, let's go. Let's go. It's May. It's 1968. Picture the scene.
So, I'm just gonna do like a full overview of May '68 and then dive into the actual text after that.
Wait, can we explain why we're talking about it? Which is kind of like involves the moment where you like read me to absolute filth.
So, are you talking about the poster on my wall? So you were at mine. Was this our third or fourth date? It was quite early on when we first started seeing each other. We're a couple, by the way. Oh my god, we didn't do pronouns.
It's implicit. We don't do pronoun rounds. We're post pronoun.
Yeah. Sorry, it just took like a huge sip of mate and then I was like, yeah. And I have that one really famous poster from May '68 of a girl throwing a brick, and I've forgotten what it says underneath it.
Well, I don't know because I didn't know what it was, and you're going to use the beauty of. Oh, it literally says something about beauty. That was obviously just like in my unconscious. La beauté est dans la rue. Oh, I like choked on la rue. Yeah, it's a great poster. And I forgotten what the first bit means. Beauty.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if it was like an expression though. Oh no.
I don't speak French.
Well, you have the poster. I thought you would have the context. The beauty is in the street. But
Yep.
like I don't know if it like kind of has like a different sort of like oh shit.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to show you a bunch of these posters. These are all the really famous ones, actually. So the two really famous ones are that one of the girl throwing the thing, and then that one of these guys. These are. Hang on a second, let me get my notes. I've got a thing about who these guys are. Yes, so that is a picture of a CRS officer, who is the like specialist at the time. I don't know if they still exist. I assume they've probably been renamed and still basically exist in Paris. They're the specialist riot police, kind of like in London the TSG, or in New York you have the Special Patrol Group.
Yeah, I used to know. But basically, yeah, they have like a lot of police in Paris. And they do, of course, have riot police, but this is the kind of thing that I just always like have things fresh in my mind when I've like been spending time there, and then I don't. I don't know why this is like for context, but I'm obsessed with Paris, and this is why she was really weirded out when I went round and was like, I like that poster, it's so sick. And then she was like, what the fuck? You don't know what that is? Because I don't know, I love like French film. I like try to speak French. I have a lot of French family. Like I've spent a lot of time in France. I don't know, train hopping, hanging out with anarchists and shit. So yeah, I think you were just like, well, how do you not know what that is? But I don't.
Yeah, and this was 9 months ago, and it's taken us until now. We didn't actually start talking about recording this as a thing until much later. But yes, I think I told you about this text at that point.
Yeah, you talked a lot about Fredy Perlman and about I think you talked about Against Leviathan, like pretty much. I think we talked about it like on our first date, maybe.
Yeah, we sat on this sofa and you asked me to explain Anti-Civ to you, and I explained the book to you while we, like, literally sitting here.
Yes, I remember it very well.
Anyway, May '68. So basically, it covers about 7 weeks. begins at the beginning of May, goes until June, like the middle of June. Um, Almost became a civil war or like a revolution. There were times when they really should have um, like overthrown the government. Um, Basically, it started as these student occupations actually in March. So you have these people who people refer to as like members of the March 22nd movement, which were these students who occupied the Sorbonne. And then basically May 68 starts when the Parisian police are ordered to clear the Sorbonne occupation on May 2nd into May 3rd. Turns into big rioting. There's like huge riots on May 6th, really horrible police violence on May 6th and May 10th. May 10th is the night of the barricades. This is where you first start getting like modern versions of like agent provocateur rumors, which like
The lingerie brand.
not the lingerie brand, no. The idea of like a person who has been inserted into a crowd by an opposition force, that may be the state or someone else, in order to like discredit the movement by being violent or something, which is that happens, yes, but also is often used as a way to like discourage radical action in protests by being like anyone who does anything must be an agent provocateur, so you can't trust them. Like anytime anyone like throws a Molotov or something, it's like this must have been an agent provocateur. This got a lot of people in trouble during the George Floyd stuff. Like a bunch of people who were like, I think it was like the like girlfriend of someone who was shot by the police ended up getting identified and arrested because people thought she was an agent provocateur because she was angry at protest.
Yeah, I think that's the main context that I've heard of it. You know, in those types of things where people are like, it's Antifa.
Yeah, exactly that kind of thing. Yeah, where it's always like this external force, and there's no understanding that it could just be people who are willing to fucking throw down. Yeah, these rumors are probably started by the Communist Party and the CGT originally to like discourage people from doing radical action because they really want to like keep a handle on what's going on.
What's the CGT?
It's the biggest main union in France, still even.
Uh,
Confederation General Travailleur.
okay.
I don't know if the mic will have picked that up. Confederation General Travailleur. I instinctively want to pronounce that in a Spanish way.
So basically, like, I'm like inferring that it's like like a huge workers' union.
Yeah, so they're actually the founders of that. They like are one of the founding bodies of the concept of syndicalism. But at this point, they are not radical at all. Really, they're very much a reformist union. They kind of fulfill the same role in France. They're more radical than Anglo unions are to a degree. They're more willing to like do actual proper strikes and stuff, but they fulfill a similar role to like the TUC or the AFL-CIO in the US, which is just like the big kind of confederation of unions in the US. But like yeah, like the TUC here.
Okay, the theme here is basically that like I never remember fucking acronyms or like what the hell any acronyms ever stand for. So like because we're sharing the mic and she's just listing acronyms and I'm just like looking at her like, huh? And then having to sort of be like, what's that one again?
The TUC is the Trade Union Council. They are the
Unfortunately, I do remember that one. Yeah.
okay. They're aligned with the Labour Party.
When it's like a UK one or like at the moment like a Berlin one because I've been there, like things that are like in my daily vocabulary, then I like know what you're talking about. But yeah,
I actually don't know what the German big one is. The only German union I know is FAUD, and that's because they're the anarchist one.
I can't remember the name of it right now, but if you said it, I would just be like, yeah.
Okay, cool, whatever, doesn't matter. Anyway, there's a general strike called by the CGT and the CP and like all the other big. There's like a few other like reasonably sized unions. Um, on May 13th, and basically they've ended up kind of being forced into this. Up until this point, the uprising has almost entirely been students and some workers in the factories. and then this general strike then actually like brings people in, like people are striking in the factories, and there's like big marches and stuff, and like there's all this stuff, like all this energy of like, oh, the students and workers should unite, kind of thing. And then basically the Latin Quarter becomes like the epicenter of all of this, the Latin Quarter in Paris.
And that's because the Sorbonne is like in the Latin Quarter, just 'cause I like thinking about the geography of it, right?
Yeah, is Sensier there as well?
Quite.
Also, I think the other one is Nanterre, not the city, the university.
Yes, I'm making a little map.
If you want to make that public, we can put that in the episode notes.
I was going to make a little drawing of it, actually.
Oh, that's cute.
Nanterre is quite far out of the city, so that's why I was interested about where it was. But basically, the Latin Quarter is there.
Yeah. Oh, and the Sorbonne is right there.
And the Sorbonne is like within it, which I'm guessing is like why it's that. I just think it's interesting.
That's also just where like all the students lived and stuff, and like a lot of the radicals lived around there at that point.
Yeah, and then I mean, basically, like all of that is the Latin Quarter, because it's showing you that point. But if you actually click on, this is really boring to listen to. Anyway, I'll draw it out. But yeah, the Latin Quarter like surrounds those 2 points.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, and then basically the police pull out of the Latin Quarter, and like stop doing violent repression at this point. And basically go fairly hands off a lot of the time, apart from like a few of the bigger demonstrations. And this actually ends up meaning that a lot of the occupations spread, for the students especially. I think this is when Sensier gets occupied. I don't know. Things then start to spread to the factories. You start getting occupations. It's really important to understand that like the base, the like grassroots rank and file workers, even the ones who actually aren't in unions, and a lot of the time are like kids or are migrant workers. There are a lot of migrant workers in, especially in the automotive industry in Paris at this point. In Citroën and Renault, you've got a lot of Yugoslav workers. You've got a lot of Spanish migrant workers as well. And I'm trying to remember where else. I think you've got quite a lot of Italian migrant workers as well. Yeah. And they start doing some occupations. The CGT are a bit like, ooh, we don't really want to be doing this yet. But they kind of go along with it and then kind of like take possession of the, do you really hate the way the thing you're drinking tastes?
It's disgusting.
Okay, I'm also drinking the same one, so I can't just give you mine. I quite like it.
No, I want to gift it to you.
Okay, we're drinking those little like CBD drinks.
It's ow. Yeah, we just smacked heads. Oh, are you okay?
I'm fine.
That woke me up. I just realised it's because it's got apple cider vinegar in it, which is just like, I mean, fine, I get it, but like, just like fuck off. I don't want that in my drink that I bought from the shop. Like, that's what I'm gonna give myself. That's like literally what my wife makes me drink when I'm sick. That's like trans girl shit. Like,
Wow. Okay.
I don't know. I just feel like you're always doing shots of like weird, like.
Yeah, that's true. I do love to do shots of like weird, spicy, acrid, vinegary liquids. And your wife has a whole thing about the shot that she makes when she's sick.
Yeah, I like nice little like, I don't know, like nice little like hot chocolates, and I don't know, being cozy and being kind to myself.
Okay, cute. I'm gonna keep talking to you about.
Yeah. Back to rioting.
So there isn't very much rioting at this point. It's mostly occupations and demonstrations, and people are like handing out leaflets and like people are kind of like experiencing like free life away from bureaucracy and like the domination of capital, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, look all these things we can do." Um, buh, 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 buh. Yeah, so like the Communist Party and the CGT start pushing for things to be like, we want incremental wage reforms and like increases in wages and like more holiday, and then everyone else is like, no, dude, what the fuck? We want to like fundamentally change the way that society works. We want worker ownership of the means of production. We want to socialize the universities. We want to, etc.
Slay.
Genau. Um, basically, everyone was expecting the Communist Party to like seize power at this point. It gets to the point where like the government resigns and collapses. Charles de Gaulle flees to Germany, West Germany. Yeah, it really got very close, and everyone was like, "Okay, yeah, the Communist Party has weapons. You guys could just seize power now. Everyone would probably let you. Like maybe you would have a civil war, but like, come on, it's France. It's not like we've done this. We've never done this before. Um, and then they just don't. They call elections. And then I think it ends up in a socialist party, communist party coalition or something.
That fucking sucks.
Yeah. So like this is the big betrayal by the like Stalinist establishment, like aligned with Moscow left, like communist movement, not left communist movement, important communist movement. That like causes the break that leads to like the new left, and is influenced by and like influences stuff like the Situationist International stuff, and then like a lot of the stuff in like the US. This is kind of like the whole of 68 worldwide. This happens to everyone, but like France is the biggest deal one, because it's the one where like one of the major powers of the West could have actually fallen and like become a communist like state, or like gone down the path of communism, started like communizing, was like in a place where like the horizons of possibility opened up, and then no one took the next step. And there are disagreements about why and how. That's what the book is about.
Okay. Um. All right. It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. If we're thinking about like moments when everything could have been different, when like we could have actually like the world could have been a different place in like a really fundamental way, and like we fucked it. It's like this is up there with like 1917 IMO. Maybe not quite as much as 1917, but like it's up there. Definitely up there, like as much with like 1977 in Italy, which I'm sure I'll talk about to you at some point. Or like more so even than like Arab Spring Occupy stuff in 2010, 2011, 2012 kind of thing. Yeah. It's like more than those things.
Okay. We're not gonna get depressed about it. We're gonna. I need some orange squash to to get to the book. Actually, you wanna? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that looks good. Hi, we're back. Okay. Welcome back to the sofa. Um,
Thank you. I have orange squash now.
Hi. I'm still drinking one of those little CBD drinks. I'm gonna actually tell you about the book now.
I can't wait.
Again, the book is called Student Worker Action Committee. It is about the Student Worker Action Committees in Sensier, in the Sensier Centre.
Which, from my adding it to the map, appears to be some sort of like center of oh my god, what's it called? Like a it's my mind's gone completely blank. Like a center of what do you call it? A recreation center.
Really? Oh, I thought it was part of the university. Maybe it's changed now.
Okay, maybe it's changed now. So it was. So that's what it was. It was connected to the university, or she's Goog- googling. No, duck going. A site of the University of Paris 3. Sorbonne. Okay, no. The Historic University of Paris. The Sorbonne building. Okay, it was part of the university. Basically, that's what we're getting.
Yeah, it's like one of the campuses or something. But was not part of the main Sorbonne occupation. Yeah. Hmm.
Also, I'm so sorry, but I think it might be said Sancier.
Okay, I specifically gave him permission to correct any pronunciations before we started recording because he speaks French and I don't.
That's a huge stretch. But I'm not sure if that's how it's pronounced, but I think it might be. But who knows? Um let's just go for it.
Sancier. Okay, I'll go with Sancier. That's fine. Okay, so basically the book is an account and an evaluation of like May and June, written by Fredy Perlman and Roger Gregoire. I think most of the stuff that's later, there isn't really much that's like narrative about it, but stuff that's later in the narrative from like June is mostly written by Roger Gregoire, which is based on like what they saw and what they did there. There's some like fun little information about how it was printed in the intro to the text, which is I'm about to read you a very long quote from Fredy Perlman's wife, um, his wife was called Lorraine Perlman, who was the like co-founder of the printing press which they ran, and by all accounts was very cool, but I do not think was in Paris. So she said, militants from Europe also visited us in Kalamazoo, which is where they were. One of them, Roger Gregoire, stayed with us for several months, working with Fredy on an account and evaluation of experiences the two had shared in May and June 1968, while members of the Citron Worker Student Action Committee. The resulting 96-page history and analysis was printed in the spring of 1969. Nice. Roger also participated in and observed local actions, and he furnished printing skills for some numbers of the Black and Red periodical, which had been launched in September of 1968. Printing equipment was not available to us in Kalamazoo, but we did find a printer willing to make negatives of the typewritten copy which had been prepared on a portable Hermes machine and laid out using a makeshift light box. When we had everything ready to print, we went to Ann Arbor to use the facilities of the Radical Education Project, an SDS, Students for a Democratic Society, printing collective. After they had showed us how to use the equipment, the REP, Radical Education Property staff, treated us as equals and gave us free access to the space. We paid them for the materials we used, helped them with collating or with other menial tasks, and left things clean when finished. The REP's openness greatly impressed Fredy, all the more since it was clear to everyone that the text we were printing did not at all conform to the political perspectives of the Ann Arbor Collective, because they were weird. Not the Ann Arbor Collective, the Pullmans, Lorraine and Fredy, because they're like ultra leftists. And at this point, a kind of situationist aligned. Fredy and Roger actually fall out later. Do you want to comment on the printing stuff first?
Yes, this is fascinating. Where is Kalamazoo?
It is on the lower peninsula of Michigan. So it's like the part of the main big body of Michigan. I'm just gonna like get a map up for you to show you where it is. Okay, can you see it there? It's kind of in the. If you think of Michigan, it's this big, like, it's like an elongated semi-oval, and then Kalamazoo is at the bottom left.
Sure. Yes. Okay. Honestly, I wouldn't. I don't even know where Michigan is. Like I know, I know it's in America.
Kalamazoo is like halfway between Chicago and Detroit.
That actually helps me. Thank you. Cool. Can we go back to the printing page that had the info, had the quote again? Thank you. I'm just better at like looking at things in writing to remember. Yes, that reminds me what I was going to say. I really enjoy this because it I just have a really good visual for it based on like how much time I've spent in printing collectives where like the sort of politics of the printing collective are like being a collective and being a community project, and like especially because I've gone and done like volunteering in those things, and then occasionally gone in and just like printed my own projects and been like, yeah, the weirdo. um or like, and like the weirdo with my partner printing some like something for a protest or a demo, or like, yeah, some shit that people are like, okay.
Yeah, this really reminds me of a lot of stuff that I've also like. I've never done like printing stuff, but it reminds me of like being part of a kind of like slightly more broad church group, because like there aren't that many of you in that area because you're in like a slightly smaller town or something, which like Ann Arbor is one of the bigger towns in Michigan, but nowhere near as big as Detroit or Chicago. I mean, Chicago's over in Illinois, but yeah. But yeah, it reminds me of like being at university in a small town and like being part of like a group that's like kind of goes from like pretty normy, like kind of like slightly radical for labor people and like kind of artsy, like people at the university and like some of the lecturers who are involved with like organizing within the union, and then like me, and I'm like writing like in big letters in Yiddish on the wall of like the occupation, fuck the police. And one of them comes up to me and is like, what does that mean? And I explain, they're like, oh, that's a bit much, isn't it? But I'm going to let you do it because like we're allowed to do whatever we want in here. Kind of reminds me of that kind of thing. Or like, yeah, just being like the like way more radical than everyone else there, weirdo, but everyone kind of likes you because you're just nice and you like help out with stuff, is like, I think quite like an essential like anarchist experience.
Yeah, I will say that having like weird whore politics amongst like a bunch of like really, really like sweet and wholesome, like sort of like people with good community, like DIY politics is also fun in a particular way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Again, this is one of those ways where like you have weird politics that are like cool and good, but are like, and like I also hold, but are like more central to your identity and like what you're into. So like those are the things that come to the fore when you're talking to people who are like, whereas like my version of that would be, I don't know, at that point probably trans politics, because like this time that I'm talking about, like people were not super versed in that, or being weird and anti-civ. Yeah. Do you have anything else to say about the little printing bit? Is that it? Would you like me to move on? Cool. So Freddie and Roger fall out a bit later, because Roger and his wife Linda are a very dedicated part of the Situationist International, which we will talk about some other time. But later on in their life became very kind of culty and very strict about like the party line. And Black and Red published a lot of stuff which was quite counter to the Situationist line. And Roger and his wife were like very aligned with it, so they ended up falling out with Freddie and Lorraine about that.
That doesn't sound very sexy.
No, and it kind of ended up making Freddie like very skeptical of situationism. Yeah. Anyway, this text resonates with me because I'm like an ex-student activist, which I hate to say, but it's true. And someone who's like been around during some of the like phases of like sudden upheaval, which have then been like recuperated and destroyed and betrayed and like turned into other stuff. And I'm specifically talking about the kind of like 2012 to 2014 student movement in the UK. That's the stuff that I think of when I did that. This text like resonates with me really strongly because it's like reminds me a lot of the stuff of where like we got recuperated and destroyed by like bureaucratic and status forces really hard. I fucking sucked, and I'm reading this being like, oh yeah, the same thing happened to you guys, but kind of worse.
That's bad. Sorry, I'm reading the next bit of note that you made about writing this while you're high on modafinil and Monster and coffee, and it being 1 a.m. and listening to gay burial music.
specifically, I say, side note that I'm writing this script while listening to some of the gayest brackets derogatory fucking music Burial made, and then later I added another thing being like, I can't remember what track I'm talking about. I have no idea. Yeah, I think it might be Rival Dealer.
Why would you say that derogatorily? Derogatorily. You're gonna be so mad at me for chewing crunchy M&Ms into the mic.
You're the one doing the audio editing.
Yeah, but you're gonna listen back to this so many times to like criticize yourself. What's next? Is this off-putting?
What is you stroking my thigh off-putting? No, what's off-putting is that you won't let me get into the microphone. Hi. Ooh. All right. So the first half of the text is basically them talking about like their own personal experiences of stuff. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I should go back up to the bit above, which explains Sensier. Big fucking quote. So, this other thing which I was reading about May 68 to prep for this explains the Sensier guys. And it's like they're different from the rest of the Sorbonne people. Yeah. Everyone else at the Sorbonne occupation was like debating late into the night. And all the Sensier guys would like get up early and like go to bed early and get up really early in the morning so they could be down at like the factory gates at like 5 a.m. to give out leaflets and like talk to the workers, because their whole thing was the student work and action committees, which is like outreach to the workers in the factories.
Oh yeah, this is where I would want to be.
Yeah, so I'm gonna read you a big fuck off quote about them. Soon after Sensier had been occupied, a group of activists commandeered a large part of the third floor. This space was to be the headquarters of their proposed worker-student action committees. The general idea was to establish links with groups of workers, however small, who shared the general libertarian revolutionary outlook of this group of students. Contact having been made, workers and students would cooperate in the joint drafting of leaflets. The leaflets would discuss the immediate problems of particular groups of workers, but in the light of what the students had shown to be possible. A given leaflet would then be jointly distributed by the workers and the students outside the navicular factory or office to which it referred. Navicular? Weird word. In some instances, the distribution would have to be undertaken by students alone. In others, hardly a single student would be needed. What brought the Sensier comrades together was a deep felt sense of the revolutionary potentialities of the situation and the knowledge that they had no time to waste. They all felt the pressing need for direct action propaganda, and that the urgency of the situation required of them that they transcend any doctrinal differences they might have with one another. They were all intensely political people. By and large, their politics were those of that new and increasingly important historical species, i.e., the ex-members or one or other revolutionary organization. I vividly remember a young printing worker who said one night that these meetings were the most exciting thing that had ever happened to him. All his life, he had dreamed of meeting people who thought and spoke like this, but every time he thought he had met one, all they were interested in was what they could get out of him. This was the first time he'd been offered disinterested help. I don't know what has happened at Sensier since the end of May. When I left, sundry Trotskyists were beginning to move in to politicize the leaflets, by which I presume they meant that the leaflets should now talk about the need to build the Revolutionary Party. If they succeed, which I doubt, knowing the caliber of the Sensier comrades, it will be a tragedy.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to send you that chapter afterwards, by the way, because it made me cry reading it.
Yeah. This is the bit we're getting to the bit I'm really excited about, basically. Because this gets down to like, alright, you tried really hard not to like spoil anything for me when we came up with the idea of like doing an episode about this, but then I feel like we got a little sideways one night, and things went a little off-piste one evening, and we went for a really long walk. Was it Valentine's Day? Anyway, I don't know. And you like kind of told me the premise of the text, and then we got into a really long. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You told me a bit about this part, And I just think it's really juicy because I think this is so much like the argument that people are always having about um the difference between like, oh, what are organizers or activists or whatever even doing? They just sit around and talk about things, like go out and do something. Um and kind of gets this is kind of like the difference between those two groups between two groups of people that are doing that within a moment of actual uprising. And I guess that it's a text that's like looking at the outcome of that.
Yeah, and like the failures, what they did wrong there. Like, so they're really heavily critical of the CGT throughout the whole thing because the CGT are kind of trying to stop them from doing this the whole time. They're trying to like insulate the workers from the students and from like the radicals and the revolutionaries to stop them from like doing the outreach and like actually talking to each other. And like that is kind of the standard line is like, oh, we got scuppered by the CGT and the CP, like fucking us and like not taking the next step and being revolutionary enough and like kind of being too bureaucratic and wanting control of the revolution. And then the text is like takes a slightly different tack on that. Basically like, okay, cool. What could we have done about that? That's our fault. We let them do that.
Okay, this might just be me. Remind me again, the CPE.
CGT.
But you also said and the CPE.
And the CP.
And CP.
Communist Party.
I heard it wrong.
Right. I'm going to start just saying Communist Party instead of CP. CGT and Communist Party. The CGT is aligned with the Communist Party. The Communist Party of France at this point is a Stalinist party, but in that they are aligned with Moscow. However, they are also reformist, and they participate in elections and have an electoral alliance with the socialists. That's like one of the reasons for the original like kick-off of all of this is because they formed an electoral alliance with the socialists.
Are we going to talk about what makes students workers and like and the like thing of like students seeing themselves as workers? Because I think that's really interesting. Am I gonna get to that too quickly? Are we gonna talk about it?
I'm about to start talking about something like that, which I think then will probably lead you to that. So basically the essential, like the main thrust of the second part, which is like titled Evaluation and Critique, is that the universities, unlike the factories, were, rather than simply being occupied by students, were socialized by students, were brought into social ownership of everyone. So a lot of the people who came into the universities were not students or university workers or lecturers or whatever. There were factory workers there. There were random other people there. There were teenagers. There were like retirees. There were all sorts of people were there. And the writers are very like critical of themselves throughout all of this, basically saying that like they went from these universities where they had opened them to everyone and been like, come on in, join us. They refer to them as ex-universities, which is like a very them thing to say. It's a very Perlman thing to say, to call them like ex-universities. He loves to come up with like little ways to refer to things that are like slightly different and kind of fun to like reflect the fact that they're different now. Calls things like ex-universities and stuff like that. Very, very like critical theory. And then not realizing that like when they were then going to the factories and talking to the workers, they were not extending the same logic to the factories and the workers. That they had abolished the university and abolished the divisions between students and workers in the universities, but were not doing that in the factories. They like abolished the differences between like a normal person and a radical. They had ceased to understand themselves as like, I am a radical and I am separate from the general mass of humanity. because I am like conscious. They got over that elsewhere, but then when they went to the factories, they still saw themselves as external radicals and as students, and like the workers within the factories were like the real workers who should own the factories, rather than being like, we should open the factories to everyone, we should socialize the factories. They were talking about worker ownership of the factories.
Okay, but surely the people who are like going to the factories are a mixture of students. Like if you're saying, yeah, that the people who are like spending time in the occupation um are a mixture of different people, then surely the people who are going down to the factories are also still a mixture of people.
Yes, but the people who are joining the university occupations, the ex-university occupations, are there are workers there, and some of them are workers who are from the factories which are being occupied. But most of them are not joining in with the factory occupations. They're staying in the university occupations, and also there's very few of them. It's mostly students, and also they're not being let in to the factory occupations. They're being prevented from entering the factory occupations and speaking to the people who are actually occupying the factories by the unions, by the CGT, physically prevent them. Like basically act as police for the occupations, for the factory occupations.
Okay, that probably would have made quite a big difference then, because that would have that would have opened a different conversation probably.
Yeah, and basically like Perlman and Gregoire say like, okay, but we had like 6,000 students standing outside these factory gates, and there were like 20 CGT big tough guys, and they said no, you're not allowed in. And then we were like standing at the gates, and the factory was occupied on the other side of the gates, and we could have just been like, let us through, fuck you. These were people who had like a few days later been in like open street combat with the riot police. But for some reason, when those when the people when the cops were union cops rather than state cops, they stopped because they were like, these guys must be and like they knew. Other times they would say they knew that the unions were not the true representation of the workers, that they were like bureaucratic and like concerned with their own ends. But for some reason, when it actually came to the gates of the factories, that consciousness stopped, and they didn't think of like, we should be going in there and opening the factories ourselves. We don't have to rely on the workers to do it for us, because the factories actually also belong to us, because we are also part of the society which creates and consumes and runs the factories, and it's not just the workers. Part of this is also a feminist critique of like, not just of like, yes, the workers are the ones who directly work in the factories, but also what about the women who run the households that like reproduce the workers in daily life and stuff like that.
Okay, yeah. So I think like I find this really easy to get on board with, but I'm wondering about like I guess I'm getting myself into the mindset of like how people like currently think about students as like sort of like these sort of like entitled, disconnected young people or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not just talking about like, I don't know, sort of like your typical like the person you think of when you think of someone being like, ugh, entitled young people. Like, I think people like, I have friends who think that like a student, not like my good friends, but like, you know, I know people of like under 40 who like have who like, you know, maybe I spend time with who have that who will like maybe hold that kind of opinion, you know, the kind of reaction to like Just Stop Oil and stuff like that, where they're just like, oh, like they're just like they're just like silly. Uh yeah, I guess that's what I'm kind of thinking how to like frame that, like how the students themselves are like coming to that consciousness of like, in the first place, like first of all, to be like, that's a position of like, yeah, we're also workers, right? And then also, hang on, I'm trying to think how to frame this. Like basically, I think it would really benefit students now to see themselves as workers. And like, I think a lot of that is like a big problem in like when people do talk about like the entitlement of students that are at universities today. Like I have friends that work in universities, and a lot of what like really fucking sucks about those jobs is like is the entitlement of like some of the students that go there, because they treat it like they are like the customers of the university. Um, like I was just telling you the other day about like a friend of mine who is like going through like almost losing her job because all the students like asked for a refund, because they're just like, I don't know, they're just like, oh, the course sucks, can we get a refund? And they don't realize that like all of the teachers are going to potentially lose their jobs over that or whatever. But if they realize that like they are also workers who are like there in training to become workers, and that their teachers are also workers, like they would have solidarity with their teachers and realize that like they're all part of the same society, I guess. And but I think that would take like a lot of work to get them to that point. So I'm just wondering, is that like how have we gotten, like how did they get to that point? Or is it just that it was easier at that point? Like was that just like more of a conversation that was just like more out there at that point that just isn't now? Does that make sense as a question?
So yeah, you're kind of right. The relationship of the student to the university was a bit different then, especially in France. I don't know what it's like in France now. Um, but also like this is kind of one of the special things about moments like this is that they do say in the text a little bit, and in some of the other stuff I read, about how the students basically went from like originally being kind of disengaged from the university being theirs, the concept of it being theirs, and then once the occupations begin, they suddenly start to think of the university as being theirs and being like, and actually they start like working with a lot of the like sympathetic lecturers and sympathetic university workers, and that's part of the self-abolition, is they just become occupiers, and they kind of come to that. And basically like the way that we're talking about it now, there's kind of two steps for for like the students you're talking about right now to take, where first of all they have to realize that they're not customers, they're students, and they have to realize that their teachers are workers, and that actually as students they're also being trained to become workers. They might end up being university workers actually. And then there's another step which they have to take after that, which is to then take the next step of being like, and then we need to be nothing at all. We need to get rid of the university. We need to like socialize the university and completely open it, and like completely break down the border between people who are associated with the university and people who aren't associated with the university. And then that's the step that this text is about. But like also people are like taking that, like in moments like this, suddenly when like I call it like a rupture in history. And there's moments where this happens in history. I am a historian, kind of. I studied history. Um, and my favorite thing to think about is these moments of rupture, where like suddenly everything becomes possible, and people's like ideas of what they are goes forward like so much further than it does at any other point, because suddenly anything is possible. So like, just like the act of stuff like this happening makes people aware of that stuff, because suddenly everything is right in front of them and very clear. So we're often very concerned with the idea of like making a normal person aware in the current moment of like what those things are, and less concerned with like.
No, everything you're saying is like really making sense to me thus far. Um, everything you said so far was really making sense to me. Um, maybe you made your point.
Yeah, maybe I have. Um, I was gonna talk about specifically. There's an anarchist tendency which Perlman calls out, which I know that I've fallen into myself quite a lot, and is like quite similar to the way that a lot of people have a tendency to think about these things. And I think it's like adjacent to this, little mini quote from the text, which is, a small number of workers from a chemical plant did come to Sancier to invite outsiders into the factory, into the chemical plant. But their invitation did not have consequences, and we even opposed by revolutionary arguments like we would be substituting ourselves for the workers. This is kind of the crux of the thing, is the idea of substituting yourself for the worker. Is they are still so deeply concerned with not thinking of themselves as the same people as the workers in the factories.
I don't think I really get what that means.
So I think this is very similar to the way that a lot of people will talk about the working class as if it is a thing that any communist or anarchist is never part of. This idea that the worker is this kind of like other person who you have to talk to, and it's never you.
Oh yeah, like this really like sacred figure, kind of.
Yeah, and it's always, I mean, especially at this point, like it actually is a factory worker. Like nowadays, like everyone idealizes it being a factory worker, but like we live in the West. There are very few factory workers left, especially in the UK. And like people haven't even managed to do the thing where they've like actually worked out that like retail workers are workers yet.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting where like I learned all my worker politics through like sex worker organizing stuff. So I like learn what a worker is via that. And then kind of was like, oh, okay. When other people are talking about a worker, they're talking about like, I don't know, it's like the idea of a factory worker is like perfect because there's like this perfect system around a factory worker that like really really easily fits all of the sort of like texts that are written, the like key texts, like I don't know, like the Marxist texts, like are written for like that type of worker, and you just have to like work too hard to apply it to other workers, and people are lazy.
Yeah, I also think it comes out of like often actually non-Marxist, but like people who have been like associate like kind of assumed to be Marxist subsequently. But I'm not going to get into that whole thing right now because that like yeah. Um, but like it's the conception of the worker as being defined by like a role in like social hierarchy and like honestly actually identity. Like it is an identity politics thing to an extent. I'm not saying that in like the annoying bullshit way. I think identity politics are good and useful, but I mean like the kind of identity of worker rather than like worker as yeah, I'm talking about the kind of like working class identity which a person can claim even if they're not necessarily actually like working class in the sense of like relationship to the means of production kind of thing. Um, like people conceiving of the worker as like this aesthetic. That's what I mean. I mean aesthetic. As a kind of aesthetic figure rather than and like actually it becomes very simple to define what a worker is and see that like fucking office workers nowadays are working class. Because yes, oh, they earn a bit more money and they like have the ability to like live slightly more comfortable lives than you might have thought of them being 40 years ago to be working class. But like the base standard of living has increased. But like their relationship to the means of production is still one of like non-ownership. And that's why actually like kind of going back to the Marxist definition is better often. Students do complicate that, but like not by much.
What else have you got? Like, just out of interest, overview. Let's have a look.
Um,
Ooh.
there's still a few little bits here which I can talk about. I haven't actually gone through the anarchist bit, which I was about to talk about.
Give me little overview.
He talks about how anarchists engage in what he calls vulgar workerism, where they defer to the figure of the workers and always want to like follow the workers' lead. And they oppose the idea of the worker to the union, and they're like, oh, the union doesn't know what they're doing, but the workers must know what they're doing. And then that means that like they actually end up in these situations, and he talks about like situations where this literally happened, where people would come to the occupations and be like, what do you want us to do? you guys have done the thing already. You're experienced. We're the workers. We're coming here and being like, what do you want us to do? We've occupied the factories. What's the next step? You guys come talk to us. And then the people would be like, people in the occupation, especially the anarchists often, would be like, oh, that's you guys. You guys do the thing. You guys know what you're doing. We shouldn't tell you what to do because we're like intelligentsia. And that's silly.
Wait, so everyone's just deferring to everyone else, or
Yeah, everyone's deferring to everyone else. And they're like specifically deferring to everyone else because they view them because they're like incapable of seeing themselves as like being allowed to act.
so like one group of people are being like, "You guys are smart, like, what's up?" And then the other group of people are being like, "We're not allowed." I don't know, sort of doing that like, yes, but you're I don't know, like you're what's the word, like that sacred worker thing, like kind of just being like, but your like status as worker, like I'm not allowed to like try to tell you what to do, essentially.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. Yeah, they're being like, "Oh, you're the worker. I can't tell you what to do. I'm only allowed to theorize about what you will do or what you're supposed to do or like what I think you're going to do." And like the fact that you are, of course, by virtue of being a worker, you must be more able to identify what should be done.
Tiring.
Deeply so. Also a thing which I've seen myself be guilty of and I've seen a lot of other people be guilty of. And like I think that's just a thing you need to fucking get over. And just be like, no, actually I'm not even a person who's not even being like I'm a person who's coming from outside to like help you out. But literally like no, like I'm one of you, we're the same. I'm gonna come with you and help you out. Like you're not taking leadership by being like, oh yeah, you come to help, you come to ask me for help, I'll help you out. You're literally just helping a person. So don't be afraid of being a leader because you're not being a leader.
I think this is really fascinating because I can like, yeah, I can just like obviously naturally hear like when you're like, yeah, I can like having been guilty of this, like I'm like, yeah, I guess having come into like an understanding of what this stuff is through basically doing sex work and then like doing sex work organizing, and it kind of meaning that immediately people are like I started doing that stuff to make friends. Not that I didn't really have like some, I had a political kind of compass from the point of view of like having a sort of like moral standing. Um, but sex worker organizing is also a good way to like meet other sex workers and like make friends, and like it's really easy to politicize hookers that way. Um, and then, people are like, this is why your job sucks, by the way. Criminalization. And yeah, so like I only came into that stuff like real like seeing myself as a worker. So I like can't separate it from that. So it's quite fascinating because I've only had that being approached in that manner from people. Um and in that way that's kind of like like being put on that pedestal in that odd way. Um and yeah, it's very strange. It's funny to think about this kind of like dance of like deference. Is that a word? Um, deference. Defra. That is an to do with farming.
Defer is a quango. They're not actually called that anymore. They don't call them that anymore, but it's like a quasi something. Basically, it means that it's a body that is associated with the government, but not directly, so that they can like technically disavow responsibility for them.
like a quasi non-governmental organization.
Yes, exactly.
I just figured that one out. question. Um, to do with agriculture and farming. Deference, yeah. The dance of deference.
Yeah, the other thing is like everyone does this thing where they always talk about how the Communist Party and the CGT are like evil and like purposefully acting against the revolution and like radicalism, rather than kind of understanding that that is basically just the structural role of these bodies and therefore positioning themselves in a way where they're like, okay, so we just need to like neutralize them rather than just kind of being angry at their existence. Which I think is like a thing which I haven't really kind of like expanded thoughts on yet, but is like an interesting starting point for a set of thoughts to go forward on. Of like, if we're thinking about the present moment where shit's kicking off, largely around Palestine solidarity stuff in a lot of parts of the world. And I think, personally, I think that a lot of the activism is being held back by large scale organizations that are tied to certain methods and forms of protest and action. And one of the reasons why we often defer to these organizations is because we're like, oh, you guys know what you're doing, you're experienced, you're the ones who are able to get people out, like large numbers of people out on the streets. We can't do that. We're just radicals. No one listens to us. Um, and we get angry at them and we're like, oh, they're evil and bad, rather than just kind of being like, oh yeah, that's their structural responsibility. That's how they're structured. Of course they're going to do that. The thing which we need to do is out organize them and organize around them, and not kind of like become obsessed with how they're betraying us all the time. Is like one of the little things that they say towards the end in the text when it comes to the Communist Party and like the large unions. And I think that's relevant at the moment. The key is just like, yeah, work out ways to fucking ignore them or work around them rather than deferring to the like authority of these organizations. But like my point is people tie themselves to these large organizations because the large organizations exist.
All right, you got 5 minutes to make it juicy. Wrap it up in a big juicy bundle.
Oh, I just put my eye on your glasses. I was too eager to get to the microphone. I think we should just do a fucking outro.
You don't have any more points to make.
Yeah, no, that's kind of it. There's other shit that I could like mention, I guess, if you want me to. Are you curious about anything? There's other stuff which I can like scroll through here. I've got like more quotes.
I'm curious about so many things. Can I tell you something funny?
Yeah.
So, what do you reckon was happening around May 27th, 1968 in Paris?
That was after things had mostly calmed down. I think that we were just talking about kind of like occupations going on and people going about stuff. I don't know about anything specific.
Well, La Viole du Vampire was released. It premiered. Jean Rollin released this film in Paris, and it was a hit because nothing was showing and people were bored. And they flocked to the cinemas.
People were bored of the movement to abolish the current state of things.
No, they were bored of nothing being on in the cinema.
Okay.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite directors. He's weird. Makes weird kind of bad, like, I mean, considered bad, slow, nonsensical, also known as surreal films. Many of his films are like, yeah, image heavy, plot thin, very sexy. And yeah, one of his first like big films was released and showed, yeah, like premiered in Paris in May 68. And yeah, it was a huge hit, but people like trashed the cinemas. at like every screening. It got like such a reputation that people would just go and see it because it was like making news for having like a reputation of people like rioting in the cinemas. But obviously that was just obviously being like kind of bigged up as part of like, oh my god, this crazy stuff's happening in Paris.
I mean, that sounds fun. I've seen the film. It's a good film. I enjoyed it. Like when, yeah, you like talked to me about it, and then I started watching it when we were like first met.
That's my little outro moment for you. I've read a really mental thing that tries to like liken all of the imagery in it to that tries to be like, oh, all of these like surreal symbols are like representative of like the revolution. I think it's a load of shit, personally. I think it's just stuff that he thought was hot. But who knows? I think it's really great that we found a way to compartmentalize our conversations so that we can focus other parts of our lives on what really matters. Raving, eating, fucking. None of this talking.
I mean, this is until we start doing episodes on those things, which like we will.
If we need to record all of those activities.
No. Well, we've had conversations about this. When will my boyfriend stop trying to pressure me to start becoming a full-service sex worker?
We wouldn't need to record that.
No, that's a good point. Anyway, I mean, I'm sure we have a lot of stuff which we could talk about on stuff like this to do with raving, especially.
So true.
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of doing an episode, we should just like record the smoking area unfold for like 3 hours. Just release that.
I think we would get some really juicy nuggets out of that.
You know, I've done that a bunch of times.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
A bientôt. Au revoir. We recorded this on the 20th of April, though we're releasing it a few weeks later. At this point, Israel has bombed every university in Gaza. The last one, Israel University, was destroyed on January 17th. At the point of recording, there had already been university occupations and encampments ongoing, but in the weeks following, more encampments popped up all over the United States, the UK, where we're based, and meaningfully for this episode in Paris.
We'd also like to like specifically call out the sick as hell shit that folks in Amsterdam are up to right now, like straight up making it look like the Paris Commune in the streets there. Specifically, I'm thinking of this like one video of a bulldozer that was like approaching one of the barricades there next to a canal, and this person was like in full block, like standing on top of the bulldozer, like to stop it from going through. And then like when they get approached by a cop, they like square up to the cop and then like jump into the canal instead of like fighting the cop. And I think that's a really good expression of like how our kind of like asymmetric opposition and resistance can work. And like there's a beautiful moment of like the crowd like cheering them on and stuff. It's wonderful. In the face of the like increasingly brutal repression by like the police and also organized fascists, occupiers have managed to like seriously scare the pro-genocide states they live under and create liberated spaces of their own which they've defended against the state. At this point, we should all know that, as Cal Poly Humboldt occupiers said, the movement for Palestinian liberation must be a movement against the police.
Yeah, I think in the sort of anxious haze of getting the first episode recorded, we skipped over the important point of making the link of solidarity to what was happening in Paris in May of '68 through time and space to what's happening today. And that's something I think about a lot as someone who spends a lot of time in archives, and probably makes a lot of sense to anyone with a kind of historical perspective, doing activism and yeah, organizing that kind of thing today. And I'm sure I'm going to go into that concept a lot because I'm obsessed with it, and it feels like a good kind of meeting point between the things that we're both interested in. And it feels especially like deeply important for a liberation struggle with as long a life as the Palestinian one.
Anyway, solidarity with all of those students. Escalate for Gaza. Free Palestine.